you gotta be so disrespectful? That is way things are going is starting out. The House of Commons coming in hot after the throne speech yesterday. The Conservatives and the Liberals made sure to mix it up yesterday. We'll be covering that, as well as we'll be discussing Carney's promises, those that he has made some very highly lofty goals as he's going to accomplish, and we learned he's not going to be doing that. Then we have a Conservative MP hopping on Power and Politics with David Cochrane and laying out what the Conservatives are expecting in a very expert tone. And then, of course, Donald Trump came in hot yesterday, making another offer of us joining and being the 51st state. This and so much more. Welcome to the LA Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Josh. I'm grateful to have you on. If you could like, share, and subscribe, really helps the show, helps us to grow, and helps give people another option that is different from the mainstream media. Now let's get into our first story. MP of Winnipeg North, Kevin Lamoureux, wasting no time on disrespecting Pierre Poilievre in the House yesterday. It was time to discuss and push some things forward. It was the first question period that we've had. And well, yes, Kevin wasted no time in throwing shade at the fact that Poilievre wasn't there.
Mr. Speaker, I miss my Conservative friends too, especially Pierre Poilievre. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, Canadian collective.
Yes, and that was way things started off real hot yesterday. And this is the response. People are upset. Oh, the Conservatives keep heckling in the House. They're supposed to be quiet and just do their thing. And this is kind of where the conversation tends to lie, we find. Is, yeah, you can have you can be frustrated and annoyed that the Conservatives tend to heckle across the aisle, and Liberals have done the same and continue to do the same as well. You can be upset which one way or about it, but the reality is both sides do it. And unfortunately, it's a part of how the House actually works. It used to be worse back in the day. Believe it or not, back in the UK, back in the day, people were on the borderline fighting each other in the House of Commons. But at least we have some harsh words being thrown around, which I know is bad for CSIS these days. We know the RCMP don't like harsh words, but that is allowed, and that is what's continued to do, and that's what the Conservatives do. And Kevin, well, this was him throwing the shot back and saying, well, where's your leader at, folks? And it was funny to watch the Liberals be so proud of themselves in that dig, and even seeing former Speaker Greg Fergus sitting back in his seat, laughing the night away. My friends, nothing is going to be changing. As much as Mark Carney and the Liberals say, this is a new government, things are going to be happening differently. Yes, we're getting a fresh start. Yes, things are a little bit different now. Yes, there's a couple new faces around. Greg Fergus is no longer the Speaker. There's a new Speaker in the House. Yes, there's some new faces around. But the animosity, the frustration, the tension still is very much there. And Kevin has always been a bit of a snake. It's kind of how he operates. It's kind of what he does as an MP. And to waste no time saying, I miss Pierre Poilievre, well, that sets the tone of how this is all going to go. You can be frustrated and say, oh, the Conservatives said it first. Andrew Scheer made some digs here and there. Yeah, I get it. All's fair, I guess. But for the party that says we're going to be focused on results and we're going to do boom, 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 to be stooping to this low in the first question period tells you about everything you know of how this is all going to go. But that was just a small story. This is small potatoes because I want to get to the meat of what's been happening today, which I thought was fairly interesting. So Mackenzie Gray made some interesting observations yesterday. He's a reporter for Global News. And he made this post yesterday. He says, with the throne speech promising to introduce trade barrier legislation by Canada Day, PMMC has seemingly shifted off what he clearly promised during the campaign. I found 5 times where Carney promised to remove trade barriers by Canada Day, not just introduce legislation. And he made sure to quote him here, and we'll go through all the quotes. April 5th in Toronto. The quote was, in fact, our government has committed to remove all federal restrictions on mobility by Canada Day, free trade in Canada, free mobility by Canada Day. April 17th, Mark Carney said at the English Leaders Debate, secondly, to commit the federal government to do its part by Canada Day, so free trade in Canada by Canada Day. April 20th, 3 days after that in Ottawa, Mark Carney said, our government will do our part for free trade in Canada. We will legislate the removal of all federal restrictions by July 1st, free trade in Canada by Canada Day. The next day, April 21st in Charlottetown, PEI, he said, we'll work with the provinces to make sure that our healthcare professionals can work anywhere in Canada as part of a drive for free trade in Canada by Canada Day. Then April 29th, election night, we will build an economy, not 13, with the government committed to free trade in Canada by Canada Day. He listed out 5 instances where Mark Carney promised that free trade and all provincial trade barriers will be gone by Canada Day. And I remember these promises being made. And I remember thinking, well, that's a pretty lofty goal. I love the enthusiasm. Love to see it happen. I think it's important for our country to be able to trade freely amongst our provinces. But I was like, how are we going to do it? How is this going to happen? Well, turns out, this is going to be the first promise broken right off the bat, isn't it? Because then Mackenzie Gray went on to say, when I asked the PMO about this, they confirmed their intention is only to introduce, not pass trade legislation by Canada Day. And they noted that the LPC platform only promised to bring forward legislation by July 1st. And here goes the tricks with the words and the nuance and hiding in the gray and the fine print. What have I been warning about? This is how Mark Carney is going to operate. And I know people are frustrated and can be annoyed and really frustrated with what's been going on in the world. But the reality is you can't just keep yelling at the top of your lungs hoping it's going to be heard. It's not. Mark Carney is a lot more cunning, and you have to be a lot more thoughtful in how you approach the issues that you're going to talk about. Going on and just crying about Melanie Jolie, cozying up to Carney and then being shooed away, whatever you want to call there. Not a story I really care about. Kind of a waste of time to cover, if I'm being quite frank. This is a story that's very interesting to me. This is a story where a big promise was made to the country because say it with me, our sovereignty is at stake. Did that sound familiar at all? That was uttered enough times in the platform during the campaign. No. The plan is they are planning to introduce legislation by Canada Day to bring down trade barriers, which means only introducing it, could take about 6 to 8 months, maybe a year for it to go through. Not expecting that to go through at any significant pace unless it actually gets pushed with some serious ferocity, which not anticipating it's going to. What's going to happen, if they even hold to this promise, they'll introduce it kind of last week before summer break. Then it's going to sit all the way until they're back in session in September. And it'll take a few more months after that. They might get it done before Christmas, but I'm not holding my breath. We might see this time next year. This is, again, one of the big promises that was made, that was significant to our sovereignty as a nation, and likely is going to be the first one broken. They said, we saw it here, black and white, 5 different times during the campaign that this is going to be done by Canada, completed by Canada. This will be done. No, moving the goalposts and saying we are going to be introducing it by Canada Day. Okay. And this is why I kind of got annoyed by Mark Carney's post yesterday where he said, my government has a mandate to bring down costs. There's that word again, mandate. Cut taxes and ensure Canadians can keep more of their paychecks. Today, on the first day of this parliament, we got right to work. And admittedly, I made sure to call that out. You said you got right to work. Well, day one, you introduced one bill. It was Bill C1, which was essentially a traditional bill that just gets introduced before every parliament. And this is what I had to say. It says, you brought forward Bill C1, a bill that is brought forward simply by tradition. Nothing of substance was completed. People are starving, people are homeless, and 25% of our population is now food insecure. Trump did 84 times more on his first day. You best start catching up if you want us to take you seriously on your quote-unquote promises. And there's some low information people commenting on this saying, are you an idiot? Trump's the American president. Are you an idiot? Do you understand how long it takes for things to move through? He's only been prime minister 2 months. This is my point. Your counterpart in the States moved very quickly on his first day as president. Yes, different rules and how things are legislated in the States than they are here. But we are not even seeing so much of the Canadian equivalent of what we saw Trump do in the States in terms of being active and trying to get bills to the table. Even people saying, he had 2 months. He's only been 2 months. What do you expect to be getting done? Exactly. You had 2 months. Yeah, sure, you're getting your cabinet in order. You're trying to get this in order. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. I understand that. But if this stuff was serious to you and you were going to get this bill done by July 1st and make sure we're bringing down all trade barriers, you would have had this stuff worked on, and I would be close, drafted up behind the scenes unofficially to make sure it's ready to be tabled by day one. You would. You would. I thought that you had a mandate. I thought you were serious about your job. I thought you were serious about bringing change. You could have set a tone and said, you know what? We've been working on this behind the scenes. We're tabling these bills, boom, 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 today. But for someone who has a mandate, I expect them to go above and beyond if things are as bad as they said during the campaign. Because our sovereignty is at stake, he said. So if our sovereignty is at stake, then why aren't you moving faster? That is a question we all have, and I think it's a legitimate question to ask. It's either one thing is true and not the other. Either our sovereignty is at stake or it's not, and you are continuing to lie for votes. Either you believe what you said during the campaign or you don't. It was simply a power grab to be able to manipulate policy that benefits you and your financial dealings. Let us know. We'd like to see it. Because the fact that we have 5 instances of the campaign saying trade barriers are coming down by Canada today, and then you're saying, actually, we're only going to be introducing legislation by Canada today. Yeah, not good enough. But we move on to the next story, which I thought was very interesting. We had Conservative MP Adam Chambers hop on with David Cochrane and Power and Politics to discuss what the Conservatives want to see and what they want to see happen with Mark Carney and this government moving forward. And, there's been a lot of, things have been heated the past several years, and rightfully so. Things are getting drastically worse here in this country. But this was a nice change up in tone, because we have the Jamil Javanis of the world who rightfully gets fired up and says what he thinks is right. And I support Jamil 100% in saying that. We see Melissa Landsman getting up there and laying the smacking down verbally. We see Pierre Poilievre doing the same. He's trying to tone it back. He drew it back maybe a little too much during the campaign, but we saw him do that. But we know that he's a pit bull at heart. It was interesting to see this side of the Conservative Party come on and hear his tone and how he talks about what he sees in the Mark Carney government and what they want to see improved.
Right, but I listened to what your leader had to say today. It's not just we'll work with you on the things from your platform that we agree with. There's also all the things from our platform we want you to do this summer as well, right? And like, I know you increase your votes and you increase your seats, but they still won the election, so they kind of get to decide where it goes, right? And I know the call is for the elimination of C-69. The argument is that you can expedite projects even with C-69 in place because there is a substitution option in there for program review, a substitution policy that you can substitute a provincial review for the federal review if it meets a certain consistent standard. That seems to be the mechanism they're going to use to fast track some of these things. Do you accept that it can be done that way, or do you think the whole thing's got to be torn down?
Well, I'm not sure. If the Prime Minister's position is that he doesn't need to get rid of C-69 to get some of these projects built, okay, well then,
show you.
Let's see how that works, because in our estimation and what we've heard from industry is that that is the impediment to getting some of these projects built. So that's why we've been calling for the repealing of C-69. If the Prime Minister thinks there is another way that's possible, I'd note that in the throne speech it says within a couple of years they're going to try to move the, the approvals down
from 5 years to 2 years.
But in a couple of years from now, well, if we're in a crisis, I mean, the time to act is now.
Yeah, and they say that within 6 months they'll try to have an agreement with provinces to get alignment on these things. But it's not a lot of time and a lot to do.
That's why I really appreciate that segment. Again, the whole conversation around C-69, I think was huge. Again, breaking down the issues of the bill and breaking down the issues of the promises that Mark Carney made. If we're in a crisis, if things are as bad as you say they are, and told Canadians that they are, and that we need to get nation building projects going, we need to get pipelines going, we need to get energy off and going. If things are that bad, wouldn't you want to repeal Bill C-69? It would make sense. We've heard from industry that's literally the impediment. Get it out of the way. And they said, well, we'll keep it in place, but we're going to actually take down the amount of time it takes to get approved from 5 years down to 2 years. And we're going to do that in a few years. It's just a joke with this party, man. It's a joke with this government. Like, they don't take anything seriously. And that I think Adam Chambers did a great job of highlighting it in the most calm way possible for the people that, again, have sensitive egos, be able to hear it and be like, oh, right. That seems weird. Can we talk about that? And I think it's a great conversation to have. But we move on to the last story of the day. You remember this? U.S. ambassador saying, Canadians need to move on from the 51st state rhetoric. We're beyond that now. It's all over. Let's just nah. Well, and then in that same interview, he said, there's easier ways to send messages to Donald Trump that aren't bringing in the king. The U.S. ambassador said, you can call him up. You can call me up. We can have a conversation. You don't need to bring in King Charles to show and flex your muscles. That's essentially what Mark Carney did. The reason why he brought in King Charles, it was just a political stunt through and through. It was to show that we're a big sovereign nation by bringing in big old daddy from across the pond to read throne speech. Kind of a funny take, isn't it? A funny move to make. And again, even Rosemary Barton recognized the fact that, the 51st state rhetoric has kind of died down.
This is a weighty moment. This is an important moment. I would point out that we haven't heard the president say the 51st state align since the prime minister went down to the Oval Office. Doesn't mean that's a closed issue at all. It might just mean that he's distracted with other world issues. But if this is intended also to send a message. There is some proof that perhaps it's working.
Yeah, I mean, the rhetoric has died down a little bit from the White House. I don't know if that means Mark Carney has gone from elbows all the way up to just halfway up at this point in time, because, while the talk of annexation and sort of conquest of a G7 and NATO ally have subsided, the economic challenges are still there, right? The threat of economic confiscation, essentially, of the auto sector and using economic coercion, the forced relocation of poor manufacturing industries, of southern Ontario in particular, that's all still there. So I'm curious to see how that is addressed in this speech, going back to my earlier point off the top of the show, just how the King navigates that, given that he's the King of Canada, but also the King of the United Kingdom, and the very different real politics situations between the two countries.
So they have that conversation. And they bring, it's kind of dying down. We'll see what happens. We know it's kind of a political move. They acknowledge it's a political move on CBC, that this is just to show Donald Trump that we are a sovereign nation. We'll never be the 51st state. And so, like clockwork, Donald Trump then dropped this message yesterday. I told Canada, which very much wants to be part of our fabulous Golden Dome system, that it'll cost $61 billion if they remain separate, but unequal nation, but will cost $0 if they become our cherished 51st state. They are considering the offer. And my friends, this obviously dropped yesterday night, and it was all political timing. The whole thing was a political theater. It always is. Mark Carney bringing in the King was political theater to signal to Donald Trump. Donald Trump dropping this on the same day was like, all right, let's have some fun, Mark Carney. Let's talk about it. That's all this really was. It's all political theater at this point. And it's fun to kind of see through and read through the lines of what's actually being said here. We'll see what that conversation is in terms of the negotiations about the Golden Dome, because there's talks of the U.S. also needs to protect Alaska. So how are you going to protect Alaska while not protecting Canada? How's that all going to work in terms of logistics? Again, I'm not the weapons manufacturer. I'm not the person trying to figure all this out. But that is a conversation people are having. It's like, you might be able to manipulate Donald Trump a little bit, because protection of Canada might just come because they have to protect Alaska. So we'll see. Again, I haven't looked too much into it. I just thought this from a political theater perspective, it was a very fascinating, interesting moment in yesterday, and how the 51st state has officially come up yet again now during Mark Carney's administration here in Canada. But that's a fun little thing just to, end off the show with, because again, if you were sitting here and watching CBC and watching all these shows, like, the throne speech, the king is here, oh, hail the king. Everyone's like, I love my king. Seeing those weird posts on social media. Well, Angus Reid did a poll, and turns out 83% of Canadians don't care. Yeah, like you're in the majority. 83% of Canadians do not care about this. This was only a big thing to the elite in Ottawa. To those who actually care about politics and those who are in Ottawa, that's the only people who actually cared about this. No regular person thought, wow, we are in good hands because the King Charles is here to do the throne speech. Oh, we are saved. No one's thinking that. But everyone did see the fact that this is pure political theater. But anyways, enjoy your day. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.